I wasn't supposed to be home until Thursday. That's what makes this whole thing feel like some kind of cosmic accident. If my meeting hadn't been cancelled, if my boss hadn't told me, "Take the early flight, get some rest," I probably would still be living in that version of my life where everything made sense. I walked into the house around 6 p.m. on Tuesday. Quiet. Too quiet, actually. My wife usually had music playing while cooking, something soft in the background. Instead, it felt paused. Like I had stepped into a room someone had just left. I remember thinking, how weird, but not much more. We'd been married 9 years. No kids, but we talked about it. We had routines, inside jokes, grocery lists on the fridge. The kind of marriage that isn't flashy but feels stable. At least I thought it did. Looking back now, I think the first crack wasn't what I saw. It was what I felt. Before all of this, I would have described our relationship as easy. We didn't fight much. Maybe that should have been a warning sign, but at the time, it felt like maturity. We gave each other space. I traveled a lot for work, and she had her own routines, her friends, her yoga classes, her freelance design gigs. She always said she liked the independence. And I believed her. There were small things, though. Things I dismissed because they didn't seem worth questioning. Like how she started locking her phone more often. Or how she'd step out to take certain calls. "Clients," she'd say. And I'd nod, because why wouldn't I? I trusted her. Completely. The kind of trust where doubt feels like an insult. Sometimes she'd seem distant when I came back from trips. Not cold, just adjusting. I told myself it was normal. We'd fall back into rhythm after a day or two. We always did. Until that Tuesday. That quiet house. That feeling that something had just slipped past me. I noticed the first real detail when I dropped my bag in the hallway. A pair of shoes. Not mine. Not hers. Men's sneakers. Dark, worn, size bigger than mine. I stood there staring at them longer than I want to admit. My brain did this strange thing where it tried to find harmless explanations first. Maybe a friend? Maybe her brother? Maybe. But her brother lives in another country. And she doesn't have male friends who just stop by. I picked one up. It was still slightly warm inside. That's the part that made my stomach drop. I checked the house. Slowly. Quietly. Like I was intruding in my own life. Living room empty. Kitchen clean. Bedroom normal. Bathroom, dry sink, but the faint smell of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. That's when the thought hit me, sharp and sudden. Someone was just here. And for the first time in our entire relationship, I didn't feel like I belonged in my own home. I called her. Tried to keep my voice normal. "Hey, when are you coming home?" She sounded surprised. "Tomorrow evening." "Why?" I hesitated. That tiny pause said more than anything I actually told her. "No reason. Just got back early." "Oh. You didn't tell me. Last minute change." Another pause. Longer this time. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, staring at the shoes again. "Everything's fine." She didn't ask anything else. Didn't seem excited I was home early. Just neutral. We hung up. I stood there in the hallway, phone still in my hand, feeling like I had just stepped into someone else's story. I didn't confront her right away. I wish I could say it's because I was being rational. But really, I think I was scared. Because once you say it out loud, once you accuse the person you love of something like that, you can't go back. And I wasn't ready to lose the version of her I still believed in. I stayed up that night, sitting in the living room. Didn't turn on the lights. Just sat there in the dim glow from outside, replaying every little thing from the past year. The late texts. The client dinners. The way she'd sometimes smile at her phone, then lock it when I walked in. All those moments I had brushed aside because I trusted her. Now they lined up like evidence. I kept looking at the door, half expecting it to open again, half hoping whoever had been there would come back so I could catch them in the act and end the uncertainty. But no one came. Around 2 a.m., I checked the trash. I don't even know why. Instinct, maybe? There was a wine bottle we hadn't opened together, 2 glasses in the sink, and a receipt from a nearby restaurant. Dinner for 2. Timestamped that same evening. I remember laughing. Not because it was funny, but because something inside me finally cracked. She came home the next day. Acted normal. That was the strangest part. She hugged me, asked about my trip, complained about traffic. Like nothing had shifted. Like our house hadn't just told me a completely different story. I watched her carefully. Every movement felt rehearsed, even though it probably wasn't. At some point I said it. "Whose shoes were those?" She blinked. "What?" "The ones in the hallway. Yesterday." She frowned, genuinely confused, or at least convincing. "I don't know what you're talking about." "They were right there. Men's sneakers." She shook her head slowly. "You're being weird." Weird. That word hit harder than I expected. Because suddenly, the narrative flipped. I wasn't the guy who found evidence. I was the guy imagining things. I pushed a little more. "There was also wine. 2 glasses. A receipt." She sighed, like I was exhausting her. "I had a friend over." "What friend?" "Anna. Anna wears size 44 men's sneakers now." She rolled her eyes. "Maybe she brought someone. I don't track what people wear." The way she said it, casual, dismissive, made me question myself for a second. That's the scary part. When someone you trust completely denies something you know you saw, your brain starts trying to reconcile it. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I misinterpreted things. Maybe I was paranoid. She leaned in softer now. "You've been traveling a lot. You're probably just stressed." And for a moment, I almost believed her. But then I asked one simple question. "Why didn't you tell me someone was here?" That's when something shifted. Just for a second, her expression tightened. A flicker. Small but real. "I didn't think it mattered," she said. That answer didn't sit right. Not because it proved anything concrete, but because it felt incomplete. We used to tell each other everything. Even small things. That was part of our easy relationship. So why hide something like that? I didn't argue further. Not then. Instead, I said, "Okay," and let it drop. But inside, something had already changed. Trust doesn't usually shatter in one loud moment. Sometimes it erodes quietly. Like realizing the person across from you is capable of lying, and doing it well. That night, I couldn't sleep in the same bed as her. I told her I had jet lag. Another lie, sitting right next to hers. Over the next few days, I started noticing everything. Patterns I had ignored before suddenly became impossible to unsee. She guarded her phone more aggressively. She started stepping outside for calls again. Once, I walked in on her quickly closing a chat window on her laptop. "Work," she said. "Always. Work." I didn't confront her every time. I just collected it all. Like some kind of unwilling investigator in my own marriage. At one point, I even checked our Wi-Fi history. There was a device I didn't recognize. Connected multiple times over the past few months. Same time patterns. Late afternoons? Evenings. My chest felt tight reading it. This wasn't a one-time thing. It was ongoing. That realization hurt more than anything else. Because it meant this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Repeated, intentional, hidden. And I had been completely blind. The actual confirmation came a week later. Not from her. From a message. She left her phone in the kitchen while showering. Something she never did anymore. It buzzed. I didn't want to look. I really didn't. But I did. "Miss you already? Yesterday wasn't enough." No name. Just a number. But I didn't need a name. My hands started shaking. There it was. Clear. Undeniable. Not paranoia. Not stress. Not imagination. Reality. I remember staring at the screen, waiting for it to somehow change. Like maybe I misunderstood. But the words stayed the same. Simple. Casual. Intimate. Proof that there was someone else in the space I thought was ours. When she came back, I was still standing there, holding her phone. She froze the second she saw my face. And in that moment she knew. There was no more pretending. "What is this?" I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was flat, almost detached, like I was narrating someone else's life instead of standing in the middle of it. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes moved from the phone in my hand to my face, and I saw it, the exact moment she understood there was no way out of this. No clever explanation, no quick deflection, no turning this into one of those conversations where I ended up apologizing for overreacting. "It's not what you think," she said finally. "Of course. It says miss you already. What am I supposed to think?" I asked, holding the phone out like it might burn me if I kept it too long. Silence stretched between us. Heavy. Suffocating. Then quieter. "It's complicated." I actually laughed. A short, broken sound that didn't feel like it came from me. "No," I said. "It's really not complicated. You're either cheating on me or you're not." She started crying then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just tears sliding down her face like she had practiced keeping them contained. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. And that was the moment something inside me shifted permanently. Because that sentence meant she knew. She knew exactly what this would do to me, to us, to everything we had built, and she chose it anyway. Not once. Not accidentally. But repeatedly. "How long?" I asked, my chest tightening. She hesitated. I could see her calculating, deciding how much truth to give me. "A few months," she said. "A few months," I repeated slowly, like if I said it enough times it might start to make sense. A few months of lies. Of me calling her from hotel rooms, telling her I missed her. Of her saying it back without hesitation. Of me planning future vacations, talking about maybe trying for a kid next year. All of that, sitting on top of this. "Who is he?" I asked. She shook her head slightly. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." Another pause. Longer this time. "Someone I met through work." That vague, convenient answer. Just enough detail to sound honest, not enough to actually be honest. I felt my hands trembling, so I put the phone down on the counter before I dropped it. "I came home early," I said quietly. "There were shoes. Wine. 2 glasses. You looked me in the eye and told me I was being weird." She closed her eyes for a second, like she couldn't bear to hear it out loud. "I panicked," she whispered. "No," I said. "You lied. And the worst part? Even then, standing there with everything exposed, a part of me still wanted her to say something that would make it all make sense. But she didn't. The argument that followed wasn't explosive. There was no screaming, no throwing things, no dramatic declarations. In a strange way, I think that made it worse. It was calm. Controlled. Like we were discussing logistics instead of dismantling a marriage. She sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. I stood across from her, not trusting myself to sit. She tried to explain. Said she felt lonely? Said I was gone too much? Said it just happened. That phrase again. Just happened. Like it was rain. Like it was something that fell out of the sky and landed on her without warning. I asked her to walk me through it. Not because I wanted details, I didn't, but because I needed to understand how something like this grows without me noticing. "It started as talking," she said. "We worked on a project together. We clicked. clicked. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my face neutral. And then? It just went further. I pressed my lips together. Further how? She looked down. You know how. I want to hear you say it. That's when her voice broke, just slightly. We slept together. The words hung in the air like something toxic. I felt it physically. Like a pressure in my chest, like the room had gotten smaller. How many times? I asked. She didn't answer right away. That hesitation told me more than any number could. More than once, she said finally. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Do you love him? That question came out before I could stop it. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Silence filled in the blank. At some point, she said, I didn't think you'd find out. And that line, that's the one that stayed with me long after everything else faded. Because it revealed the real truth. Not regret. Not remorse. Just miscalculation. Like the problem wasn't what she did, it was that I walked in a day early. I sat down finally, because my legs felt unsteady. I trusted you, I said quietly. I know, she whispered. No, I said, shaking my head. I don't think you do. Because if you did, you wouldn't have done this. Not like this. She started crying harder then, but it didn't change anything. I realized, sitting there, that I was talking to someone who had already made her choices. I was just catching up to them. The aftermath was messy in a way that doesn't translate well when people summarize things later. We didn't separate immediately. I know that sounds pathetic to some people. Maybe it is. But when your life is built around someone, your routines, your home, your sense of normal, you don't just flip a switch and walk away. We tried. Or at least I did. She said she ended it. Swore it was over. Blocked his number in front of me. Deleted messages. Offered transparency, passwords, whatever I wanted. And for a while, I clung to that. We went to therapy. Sat in a room with a stranger who asked us to rebuild trust, like it was a structure you could just reconstruct with the right tools. I said all the things you're supposed to say. I want to make this work. I still love her. I believe people can make mistakes. And part of me meant it. But another part of me didn't. Because every time she picked up her phone, I noticed. Every time she came home 10 minutes later than expected, I noticed. Every time she laughed at a message, even if it was harmless, something twisted inside me. I started checking things. Her phone when she wasn't around. Her email. Even stupid things, like scanning the hallway for unfamiliar shoes. I hated myself for it. I used to be the kind of person who trusted easily. Who believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. Now I was someone who looked for evidence. And the worst part was, I couldn't tell if that version of me was irrational. Or just finally paying attention. Eventually, the distance between us stopped being something we talked about, and just became permanent. Not official at first. There was no single moment where we said, "This is over." It just eroded. We lived in the same house, but it didn't feel like a shared space anymore. It felt like two separate lives happening in parallel, occasionally intersecting for practical reasons. Conversations became functional. Did you pay the bill? What do you want for dinner? I'll be home late. No more random jokes. No more reaching for each other without thinking. No more of that quiet, unspoken comfort that used to define us. I stopped telling her things about my day. She stopped asking. At night, we lay in the same bed, facing opposite directions, with a kind of silence that felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. Sometimes I would lie awake and think about who she was texting before. What they talked about. How she looked at him. Those thoughts would loop endlessly, no matter how much I tried to shut them down. And then one day, I realized something simple but devastating. Even if she never spoke to him again, I would never go back to who I was before. And that meant we couldn't go back either. We separated about 8 months later. No big fight. No dramatic scene. Just a quiet conversation at the kitchen table where we both finally admitted what had been obvious for a long time. "This isn't working," I said. She nodded. And that was it. I still think about that day sometimes. Not every day. But often enough that it surprises me. Walking into the house early. The quiet. The air that felt interrupted. And those shoes sitting by the door like they belonged there. If I had come home on Thursday like I was supposed to, would I still be in that marriage? That question messes with me more than I'd like to admit. Because the answer is probably yes. I would still be calling her from hotel rooms, telling her about my day. Still believing her when she said she missed me. Still building a future on something that wasn't real. There's a strange kind of grief in that. Not just for the relationship itself, but for the version of my life I thought I had. The version of myself who felt secure, who didn't second-guess everything. I don't think she ever fully understood what she broke. It wasn't just trust in her. It was trust in my own perception. My instincts. My ability to read the person closest to me. Even now, years later, I catch myself questioning things. If someone is distant, I notice. If something feels off, I don't ignore it anymore, but I also don't fully trust my interpretation of it. That's the part that lingers. The doubt doesn't just disappear when the relationship ends. It stays. Quiet. Subtle. Waiting. And sometimes, in the middle of completely normal moments, I remember those shoes. Warm. By the door. And I wonder how long they had been there before I finally saw them.